It started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. Friday evening, rain against the porch roof, bourbon in hand, the kind of Texas night that smells like rust and wet cedar. I was halfway through the evening news when the phone buzzed, unknown number. Normally, I'd let it ring. But something in me, maybe boredom, maybe instinct, picked it up. "Mr. Danner?" a man said, too polite, too measured. "This is Dr. Rourke's office. We need to confirm your procedure tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock sharp." My glass froze halfway up. "I don't have any procedure scheduled," I said. Silence. Then a throat clear. "That's strange. Your son-in-law, Mr. Trent Calloway, signed the paperwork himself. Said you'd been forgetting things lately? Early dementia screening, with preliminary medication." My chest tightened. Trent. The name alone tasted like metal. I thanked the man, hung up, and sat there a long time, the rain tapping harder. The bottle on the table caught the TV light, amber and alive. I poured another. Maybe he meant well, I thought. Maybe he was trying to help. But dementia screening didn't sound like help. It sounded like control. When you spend 40 years designing machinery, you learn to recognize systems, and something in this one was misaligned. At 9:04 p.m., the phone rang again. My daughter's voice this time. "Dad? Did Dr. Rourke's office call you?" Her tone was careful, like she was walking barefoot over glass. "They did," I said. "Seems your husband's scheduling things behind my back." She sighed too long. "He just worries. You've been forgetful. You left the stove on last week." I turned it off. "He came in halfway through dinner." "Still," she said, "he thinks you should stop thinking for myself." The line went silent. I could almost hear Trent in the room with her, whispering what to say. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "if I ever need a doctor, I'll be the one to make the appointment. Not him." "I know, Dad. Please don't be mad at him." "I'm not mad," I lied. "I'm curious." After she hung up, I sat there in the dim kitchen, watching the rain slide down the window. I'd built bridges, power grids, even a dam wind farm once, but I couldn't seem to build one thing that mattered: peace between my daughter and her husband. Outside, a car rolled to a stop at the curb. Headlights cut through the rain. White Tesla. Trent's. He didn't come to the door right away. Just sat there, engine humming. When he finally stepped out, he had an umbrella and that salesman's smile that never reached his eyes. "Evening, Pop," he said, like we were friends. "What's the emergency?" He laughed. "No emergency. Just checking in. Emily said you sounded upset." I opened the door wider. "Come in then. Let's talk." He shook the umbrella, stepped inside, scanning my living room like he was taking inventory. "You really ought to upgrade this place," he said. "Sell it, move closer to us. The market's hot." "I like it here," I said. Sure. But it's a lot to handle for a man your age. You forget things. Pipes burst, roofs leak, not if you maintain them properly." He grinned, slick and lazy. "You've still got that engineer mind, huh? Best tool I've ever owned," I said. Unlike some people, I never learned to use others instead. That made his jaw twitch. He took a slow breath, then reached into his jacket and set a folded document on the table. "Just something to look over," he said. "Power of attorney. For medical emergencies. Standard stuff." I didn't even touch it. "You trying to put me under guardianship, Trent?" His smile didn't move, but his eyes hardened. "I'm trying to protect you. Before you hurt yourself, or someone else." Rain thundered on the roof. Lightning flashed. "You're lying," I said calmly. "And you're sloppy about it." He chuckled. "You always think you're the smartest man in the room." "No," I said. "Just the most patient." He left the papers there, said something about thinking it over, and walked back into the storm. Through the window, I watched him slip into his car, phone to his ear before he'd even closed the door. Probably calling her. The bourbon burned going down. I turned the document over, scanning his neat, printed name under mine. No witnesses yet. But the date was tomorrow. That's when I realized this wasn't just about control. It was about eliminating me. And Trent Calloway had just made his first mistake. He underestimated how much of the old engineer in me was still alive. I slept like someone who had spent the night building a bridge, dreams full of rivets and steel beams, and woke to the sun cutting across the table in thin, precise lines. The papers Trent left were still there, face down like a dare. I didn't touch the phone for an hour. Old men like me know the value of delay. It gives people the chance to show their colors. At 9 Dr. Rourke's office called again, this time with the clipped, efficient voice of someone who'd learned to smooth over discomfort. Mr. Danner, are you able to come by today? We need to run a few baseline tests before tomorrow. Who authorized this? I asked. Mr. Calloway signed the consent, she said. He left a note that you'd appreciate the quickness. The receptionist laughed softly, like she'd been told a joke. Said it'd be easier if we handled the paperwork for him. Easier. For whom? I dressed in a shirt that had seen better Saturdays and drove the long way into town, past the feed store and the diner where everyone pretended not to watch their neighbors. The clinic was small, brittle with fluorescent light and the smell of antiseptic. Dr. Rourke was 30, maybe 35, almost too young to be taken seriously by people my age. He had the lean carefulness of someone who read grant applications at night and practiced bedside manners by day. Mr. Danner? He stood and offered a hand. Emily's told me a lot about you. Nothing she hasn't regretted, I said. He blinked, didn't miss a beat. Good actor. We sat in a tiny exam room. Paper crinkled under my arm. He ran the usual tests: blood pressure, reflexes, memory questions that felt like the kind you got in a hotel lobby just to make conversation. He was efficient, smiling in the right places. As he left to prepare the specimen, I glanced at the tray on the counter. There were vials, small, capped, sterile, and a syringe laid out like a surgical promise. My stomach did that little flip it does when machinery goes wrong. When he came back, he brought with him a folder. Just some consent forms to sign, Mr. Danner. Standard. He pushed the pen across the tray as if it were a prop. I read the first page. Consent for experimental prophylactic injection. Read the header. The phrasing was clinical, cold, for preventative use in early-stage neurocognitive impairment trials. Words to make a man feel small and science large. But someone had scrawled in the margin in a different ink, administer at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Notify Trent if patient resists. The handwriting was neat, the kind of careful loop that belonged to sales reps and lawyers. Trent's handwriting, in my mind, like a fingerprint. Doctor, I said, folding the page back on itself. What is this exactly? Rourke's smile narrowed minutely. A trial compound. Low dose. We've had good preliminary results. Keeps certain markers from progressing. His voice had the exact confidence of someone selling a better future. Trent is very worried. His family. He wants to make sure you're safe. Trent is worried. I repeated. We're controlling? The words landed like a hammer. He didn't look surprised. Either he'd anticipated that question, or he'd already talked to Trent enough to know how men like me spoke. Look, he said softly. This is above my pay grade. I'm following a directive. If you'd like, I can go over the safety data. If you have data, leave it with me. And tell me the truth. He hesitated, then leaned in. Trent offered compensation for expedited administration. He said it would be best to have everything in place before you forget to consent. He provided the form. My engineer brain started making lists. Who benefits? Who signs? What's the failure mode? I could see the vector, a man who wanted ownership, control, a clean sweep of assets and autonomy. If they could get me legally incapacitated, they could move things. If the doctor injected an experimental substance, what were the risks? What if the drug was a sedative, or something that labeled me incompetent? The word bribe felt too small. This was a system of leverage with money as grease. I left the clinic without letting them inject me. I drove straight to the hardware store and bought a small voice recorder, analog in effect though digital in delivery. Because engineers keep old habits, you record the inputs before you trust the outputs. At home, Emily was watering the geraniums in the kitchen, hair in a messy knot, face still puffy from sleep. She looked, how do I say this, pulled, like a sweater that had been stretched at the neck. You didn't go? She asked before I could say anything. I went and I left. I set the recorder on the table, like a small metallic judge. I want to hear what Dr. Rourke tells me. I want you to tell me what Trent told you. She looked away. He thinks it's for the best. He thinks you don't notice things. He's scared you'll hurt yourself. Her voice broke on the last word. I could see the raw stitch of it. She wanted to believe him. Did he pay Dr. Rourke? I asked flatly. Emily's jaw worked. No, he wouldn't, he just… She ran a hand through her hair. Trent said if I didn't get Dad to agree, he'd make things difficult. He said he could make sure the house gets labeled unsafe for habitation. She swallowed. He said landlords don't look kindly on old wiring and that he knows someone at the county. The sentence hung like a loose wire. Did he threaten you? I asked. She looked at me then, and there was the flash of the daughter I knew, young, stubborn, wanting to fix things with apologies. Not in so many words. He's subtle. He tells me I owe it to him to be practical. He tells me we have to think about mortgage and kids and Dad, he said if you lose capacity, we can make decisions. For everyone's good. For everyone's good, I echoed. I could taste the phrase in my mouth, and it tasted like coins. What did you tell him? I told him I'd try. She reached for my hand and squeezed hard, as if to transfer something steady. I love you, Dad. I love him too. But he's been winning arguments for months. He has a way of convincing people. The last words were a whisper. He says I can't be both. I remembered the night she married Trent. She'd walked down the church aisle in a dress that smelled of gardenias and hope. I remembered putting a hand to her elbow and thinking somehow the world had tilted in a small, manageable way. I hadn't minded losing sleep then. I would have given him the world if he'd promised to keep her happy. Instead, he traded happiness for ledger lines. I told her nothing of the recorder, of course. Pitfalls of engineers. We like evidence, but we also like to let snarls play out until you know the full load. I told her to stay home that afternoon and not let Trent in alone. She nodded, eyes huge. Okay. I'll tell him I'm sick. She looked guilty at the idea. I'm sorry. Save the apologies for later, I said. Right now, we gather facts. I drove into town and found a coffee shop where old men read newspapers and young men pretended to. I sat in a back booth and called an old friend, Mason. People still trusted him because he fixed tractors and didn't argue philosophy. He'd run into Trent at the county office before. Watch him, Mason said into the phone. He's got a knack for sweet talk and a short temper with anyone who won't sign. He does business like a door-to-door salesman with a grudge. Anything about Rourke? I asked. Mason hesitated. He's a new doc. Fresh out of whatever program. Quiet. A lot of folks around here like him because he listens. Bribes change listening. I said. I didn't tell Mason I'd heard about payment. I wanted to see who else picked up the scent. That evening, I went by the clinic again under the pretense of bringing cookies. Old habits make good disguises. The receptionist remembered me and offered me tea like people give you their hand to see if you'll squeeze it. I waited until Dr. Rourke came out of his office, clipboard under his arm, and I stepped into his path with a deliberate, harmless smile. Doctor, I said. I was thinking, family brings home baked. Figured you might like a slice. I held up the tinful like a peace offering. He accepted with the professional smile of a man who'd learned to be polite to people who were not his patients. I didn't talk about trials or ethics. I asked questions that a man with an engineering mind asks when he wants truth. Who supplies your compounds? Where are they manufactured? Who signed the invoices? Something in Rourke's face flickered, annoyance, then embarrassment. We're subcontracting through a research group, he said. Drugs are regulated, but there's a process. He kept looking past me at the parking lot, which told me someone was waiting for him, someone who had to be reassured. Mr. Calloway offered to expedite things if we'd filed the paperwork today. It would be cleaner for the patient. Cleaner for whom? I asked. For Mr. Calloway, he admitted, voice small. He's concerned about legal complications. He wanted to avoid, family disputes. Did he pay you? The question was a rock dropped in a pool. The ripples told you how deep it was. Rourke swallowed. There was a deposit. I didn't. He stopped himself. Look, I'm a physician. I want to help people. I don't want to be part of a family fight. And yet, the air between us was thin as a blade. If you accept money to administer a compound without full consent, you haven't helped anyone. He looked like a man who'd been caught choosing a path and then wondering when the ground beneath him had shifted. What do you want, Mr. Danner? He asked. Just the truth, I said. And a record of every communication between you and Mr. Calloway. I'll come by tomorrow and you can give it to me. It sounded simple. It was a trap laid in polite language. After I left, I watched from across the street as Trent's Tesla glinted and a figure, Trent, exited the vehicle, phone in hand. He scanned the lot, lips moving. When he met my eyes through the glass, he smiled, thin, cold-blooded. Then he walked toward the clinic like a man on his way to claim a prize. That night, at the kitchen table, the recorder between us, I finally let Emily listen to the voicemails from the clinic. We played back the receptionist's scripts and Rourke's measured words. The tape squealed once and then the truth was there, mechanical, unimpeachable. She cried, and then she cried for a different reason. He said it was for safety. She whispered. He said I should be practical. I thought he was trying to help. I thought, I'm so stupid. You're not stupid, I said. You were loved into feeling obligated. That's dangerous. Love can be used like leverage. She swallowed and lifted her face. What will you do? Her voice carried the helplessness of a woman who wanted to be the kind of daughter who could fix things with a hug. I thought of the syringe still waiting on a tray. The thought of someone deciding, without my consent, to change the chemistry of my mind shoved something cold and clear into my chest. I thought of the house, the wiring, the ledgers. I thought of Trent's neat signature on the form, the way he'd left a date, tomorrow, like a calendar bomb. Tomorrow, I said quietly, and the single word had the weight of a sentence. Tomorrow, I'll be at Dr. Rourke's office. I'll sign nothing. If they try to administer anything, I'll make sure there's a record. I didn't mention the plan I was already assembling in my head, how you turn a man's tactics back on him by using his own haste and arrogance. That would come later. For now, the point was to survive the betrayal without letting it destroy the family. She nodded, small, grateful, afraid. I'll tell him no, she promised. I will. Good. I took her hand. And Emily? She looked at me. If he comes to you with that smile, I said softly, remember what we're worth. Not in dollars. In truth. We sat like that for a long time, the house breathing around us, knowing a storm was coming but not yet making its sound. Outside, the Tesla's headlights had already disappeared down the street. Inside, the clock ticked, measured, relentless. When I finally went to bed, my head was full of schematics, not for bridges this time, but for traps, timing, leverage, a way to make their own plan unravel beautifully in front of everyone who'd believe them. I had 40 years of building things to fall back on. The thing you build to catch liars is not complicated. It's patient. And I'd been patient my whole life. Tonight, patience would become something else. The breaking point was near. The next morning, all the pieces would be in motion. The morning came quiet, almost mocking. The world looked normal, too normal for what I knew was waiting beneath it. I brewed coffee, black and steady, while the sun split across the counter in a clean, merciless line. The documents still sat where Trent had left them. Every fold, every line of ink, felt like bait. Engineers don't react, we calculate. Rage wastes time. Revenge, if done right, is math, pressure, sequence, control. I poured the coffee, turned on the voice recorder, and said out loud, Entry 1, Proof of Unauthorized Medical Directive. Initiator Trent Calloway. The sound of my own voice in that kitchen felt like welding metal, hot, decisive, permanent. At 8:20 a.m., I called Dr. Rourke's office and confirmed my procedure. Perfect, the receptionist chirped. Mr. Calloway already prepaid. Good of him, I said and hung up. That word, prepaid, told me everything I needed to know. Trent wasn't waiting for my consent, he was buying certainty. And certainty in the wrong hands kills. I spent the next hour preparing, not like a patient, but like a man laying out blueprints for war. I gathered what I needed. My old GoPro, small enough to clip under a jacket collar. The recorder charged. A single-page document of my own, a notarized revocation of all third-party medical authorizations. Signed, sealed, legal. When I looked at my reflection before leaving, I barely recognized it. There was calm, yes, but not the kind you get from peace. It was the stillness before voltage hits a circuit. Emily called just as I was about to leave. Dad, he's pacing, she whispered. He knows something's off. He said if you don't show up, he'll go to court. Let him, I said. Please, just be careful. I always am. She hesitated. He told me last night that after today, things will be simpler. That's what he said, simpler. Then he's not planning for tomorrow, I replied. But I am. When I arrived at the clinic, Trent's Tesla was already parked out front. He was leaning against it, phone in hand, sunglasses reflecting the glass door. The smile he gave me was thin, professional, practiced. Morning, Pop, he said. Ready for your big day? I've had a lot of big days, I said. This one's small. Inside, the receptionist avoided my eyes. Dr. Rourke appeared moments later, wearing that same fixed calm doctors use when they're trying not to panic. Mr. Danner, he said. Let's get you set up. I followed him in. Trent trailed behind, uninvited. The exam room smelled faintly of alcohol and rubber gloves. A single syringe gleamed on the tray. Before we start, I said, setting my document on the counter. Read that aloud. Rourke froze. Trent frowned. It's a revocation, I said. Effective immediately. Any procedure performed without my written consent is malpractice. And this? I tapped my collar, where the GoPro light winked once. Is recording? Trent's grin vanished. What the hell is this? Transparency, I said. Rourke looked pale now. Mr. Calloway said. I know what he said. I interrupted. He said I was losing my mind. You tell me, doctor, does this sound like dementia to you? Trent slammed his palm on the counter. You're paranoid, old man. I was trying to protect my wife. From what? I asked quietly. An inheritance? A house? The one thing you can't earn yourself? His face twitched, anger bleeding through the slickness. You've always hated me. No, I said. I just finally see you. Rourke stepped back, sweat forming at his temple. Mr. Danner, maybe we should reschedule. There won't be another appointment, I said, retrieving my recorder. You'll be hearing from the medical board. Trent lunged forward, finger pointed. You're not going to ruin me over this. I met his eyes steady. You already did that yourself. He left first, too fast, too loud, leaving a trail of fear behind him. When the door slammed, the air felt lighter. Rourke sat down heavily. I'm sorry, he said, voice thin. I shouldn't have. He said it was just authorization, that you'd already agreed. You've got a family? I asked. Yes. Then don't lie for men like him again. They don't protect anyone but themselves. He nodded, eyes glassy. I'll send you the records. I drove home with the window cracked, the wind cutting through, the smell of coffee still on my sleeve. My pulse had stopped racing, but the math wasn't done yet. Men like Trent don't back down. They double down. Which meant the real move would come next. As I pulled into the driveway, my phone buzzed again. A message from Emily. He's furious. He says you embarrassed him. He's on the phone with someone, maybe the bank. Dad, what did you do? I read it twice, then smiled without humor. What I had to. I said to no one. Phase 2 complete. Then I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and started designing something more efficient than anger, a trap built from truth, precision, and time. Because revenge, if you're patient enough, doesn't need violence. It just needs proof. And by morning, I'd have more than enough of that. I treated the next 48 hours like a deadline on a drawing board. Every line had to meet tolerance, every joint had to bear load. The work wasn't glamorous. It was small, tedious, and absolute, which suited me fine. First stop, Mason's workshop. He smelled like diesel and sweat, and that made him honest. You need witnesses, Mason said before I could explain. He pulled a rag from the wrench tray and wiped his hands. People will side with whoever seems less scared. You want the opposite. I want records, I said. Bank transfers, emails, doctor invoices. Anything that shows Trent paid for influence. Mason nodded. And people. I'll bring Hank from the feed store. He hates liars. We mapped a simple scheme over coffee and grease, get documentary proof, file it where it couldn't be ignored, and present it in public where Trent's posture would crumble under eyes that knew him. Small towns are slow, but gossip is a current you can put a charge into. Step 2, paperwork. I called the county clerk and, under the guise of a routine title transfer inquiry, asked for any liens or notices against my property. The clerk's voice was bored until it wasn't. There's been an inquiry, she said, about possible code violations. By whom? I asked. Any names? She hesitated. A Mr. Trent Calloway. She read me the date. My plan moved another notch closer to reality. Next, the bank. I put on a clean shirt and walked in like a man who hadn't lost sleep. I asked to see records of a recent draft. They couldn't show me account details, but a manager, polite and curious, agreed to flag any unusual withdrawals tied to my house if I filed an official complaint. I filed it. While forms and calls took time, other moves required more delicate hands. I needed Rourke's communications. He'd promised to send them. Men like him assume promises are insurance. But insurance doesn't hold up in court without signatures and timestamps. So I noodled another angle: make Trent show his hand in public. I texted Emily a plan in blunt sentences. She read them twice and then called. Dad, are you sure? If he sees you poking, he'll move faster. He already moved, I said. We're slowing him. I need you to stall him. If he presses, tell him you need a final meeting at the community center. Tell him you want the family involved. Her voice wavered. He'll smell it. Good. Let him sniff. She did it. That afternoon, Trent came to the house like a man with a deadline. He wanted signatures, assurances, and to be reassured he could still control the thermostat of our lives. Emily played the part of the confused spouse well. When he pushed, she pushed back just enough to keep him listening. Let's take it to the community meeting, she said, voice small and precise. I want everyone to know we're doing what's best. He said yes too fast. While they planned, I built the recording net. The GoPro tucked under my collar, the recorder on the counter, Mason and Hank ready in the audience at the center. Rourke had been coaxed into forwarding his emails to a newly created address I controlled, under the pretense of cleaning up patient files. Engineers can be social engineers when the problem calls for it, not maliciously, but like fixing a wiring harness so sparks don't jump where they shouldn't. One quiet victory, a paper trail showed up at my door the evening before the meeting, a receipt with Trent's name and a research group's invoice. The deposit amount was modest, but its presence meant motive. I took a photo, timestamped it, and uploaded it to an email chain I'd started with the town clerk and a local reporter I knew by reputation. The reporter replied with a single line, "Sounds like a story? Send more." That was all the permission I needed. That night Trent called, voice sharp. "You're trying to ruin me." "I'm trying to stop you from ruining my family," I said. "You've already got your name on paperwork you don't understand." "You're delusional," he spat. "You'll lose everything." "You're the one who tried to buy my consent," I said. "That's on you." He hung up. I let the line die. The trap didn't require him to be clever, only arrogant. Arrogance reveals itself. The day of the meeting I dressed in a jacket I'd worn at my retirement party, looked respectable, not theatrical. The community center smelled like lemon cleaner and folding chairs. People arrived with casseroles and interest. Hank sat in the third row and winked. Mason took the back. I'd asked the clerk to read Rourke's purported consent aloud as an item of administrative concern. She balked, but the reporter encouraged her, and the county has a taste for transparency. Trent arrived late, as expected, triumphant and winded. He took his seat near the front like a man on a stage. Emily sat beside him, fingers like a bird. The meeting began, and small talk folded into the town business, potholes, the school fundraiser, the next charity drive. The clerk cleared her throat and then, deliberately, announced the item that would change the rhythm of the room, a citizen concern regarding potential unauthorized medical directives affecting a local resident. Trent's face tightened. He leaned to Emily. "What's this?" he hissed. The clerk read the email thread I'd arranged. Timestamps, invoices, the clinic's receptionist's recorded message, Rourke's slip about expedited administration, and the bank's note about a flagged draft. Each sentence landed like a chisel. People shifted in their seats. Murmurs rose. Trent stood up, posture defensive, and accused me of fabrication. "He's making things up," he blurted. "This is a smear." His voice carried, the room listened. He named names, claimed concern, and tried to turn it into a battle of family privacy. He looked dangerous, a man who thought money could buy a silence that never existed. I waited. Engineers wait for the structure to fail under its load. And fail it did. A neighbor who'd once borrowed money from Trent raised their hand and said plainly, "He came to me about wiring in my house and I paid him extra." He never finished the job. A young woman spoke up about a pawned guitar. The reporter's phone lit with messages. The town's small network began to expose pattern. By the time the meeting recessed, Trent's composure was cracked. He stormed out, not gracefully but like someone who trips on the last stair. We had the public's attention. We had witnesses. We had a paper trail. The syringe was still a threat, but its power had been diluted by light. The trap had worked because truth, presented steadily and publicly, makes liars self-evident. That night, Emily sat with me and finally let herself be angry. "I thought he loved me," she said. "I thought he was protecting us." She cried like a person whose map had been redrawn. I put my hand on her shoulder and felt the tremor of a life resetting. "We're not done," I told her. "But we've made the first move. Tomorrow, we finish." And for the first time in a long while, I slept without schematics running in my head, not because the work was over, but because preparation had become a kind of armor. The trap was set. The execution would be precise. The morning of the procedure felt like a courtroom coming to order. I dressed in plain clothes, a sweater, jacket, the kind of outfit that says I'm respectable and you've already lost. Emily walked me to the car and kissed my temple like a child blessing a parent. "Be careful," she whispered. I squeezed her hand and she squeezed back like someone anchoring herself to truth. At the clinic, Trent was already there, sleeves rolled, eyes eager, the kind of eagerness that smells like a man who expects a trophy. Rourke greeted me with the sorrow of someone who'd realized he'd been hired to play a part in a debacle. His hands trembled just enough that the syringe looked theatrical in them. "Mr. Danner, we just need your signature," Rourke said. "It's routine." "There's been a change," I said, calm as a metronome. "I revoked any third-party medical authorization. I'm here voluntarily for tests, nothing more." Trent stepped forward then, too fast, too certain. "You're making my family look bad." He spat, voice low. "You're putting Emily through." He didn't finish. The room hummed with other people now. I'd arranged it so. A nurse who owed Hank a favor, the reporter who liked a good scandal, and 2 neighbors who'd shown up because community rumors taste like an unsolved puzzle. "You should sit down, Trent," I said. "We can talk this out." He laughed in a way that cracked. "Talk? You humiliate me in public?" His hand went to his phone. "I'll call the sheriff." He wanted to escalate. He always wanted more sound and fewer witnesses. Rourke swallowed. "We need consent," he murmured. "Consent is here," I said, tapping the revocation on the counter. "And there's something else." I reached up and flipped the GoPro on. A red light winked, small and merciless. "This is recording everything." For a second Trent's face lost the actor's mask and a raw animal glare took over. "You," he began. "You tried to bribe the clinic," I said, voice steady. "You demanded an expedited injection. You signed forms without my consent. You attempted to make me medically incapacitated for your convenience." I let the words sit like charges in a courtroom. Trent's mouth worked. "You have no proof. Except for the receipts," I said. "The bank inquiry, the clinic's voicemail, and Dr. Rourke's own admission. And witnesses." I nodded at Hank Mason and the clerk. "You can argue motive, but not that you put money on the table." He swallowed so hard his Adam's apple bobbed. "You're a liar," he said. "No," I corrected. "You are." Then he did the stupid thing all arrogant men do. He lunged. Not to strike, but to grab the folder and the syringe, to control the narrative physically. I moved because you don't wait for fools to stab at paper. My hand closed on his wrist. He twisted. The syringe clattered to the floor and a neat, terrified gasp spread through the room. Rourke went pale. The clerk reached for the phone, fingers shaking. My GoPro caught everything, the slam, the hiss of breath, the sputtered accusations. Trent tried to make it into spectacle, but spectacle requires stagecraft, and he had only rage. The sheriff arrived minutes later. Call logs are useful things, and took statements. Trent sat on the curb like a man who'd been stripped of costume and left in the cold. He shouted about defamation in courtrooms and about how IDV ruined him. The neighbors watched, eyebrows heavy, and that last thing, the town's judgment, landed harder than any legal word. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I let the sheriff ask questions and Rourke give his answers. I let the recorder and the GoPro and the bank notice do the work. In the old days, you'd lay a blueprint and wait. In the new, you record a truth and let it speak louder than any man's screech. Emily came to my side as the sheriff took my statement. She looked like someone who'd been torn between 2 tastes and finally chosen water. She stood there, hand in hand with me, not because I'd outwitted her husband, but because she'd chosen the person who'd been her anchor from the beginning. Later, when everyone had left and the clinic's door clicked shut, Trent sat across from me at my kitchen table, self-pitying, broken, and somehow smaller than I'd imagined. He tried one last plea about family, and, mistakes. But the words fell like loose nails. "You thought you could buy a life," I said. "And in doing so, you thought you could sell mine." My voice was quiet. "You'd have been rich in other people's obedience. You're poor in decency." He stared at the floor like a man counting empty pockets. "I needed the money," he said finally, voice low. The house, the renovations, the payments, things are tight. It was a small confession, and for a moment, the monster reduced to a man who'd gambled and lost. That's no excuse, Emily said, and there was iron under her sorrow. You used me as a bargaining chip. She was no longer the woman Trent had puppet. She was the woman who'd seen him clearly. When the sheriff delivered paperwork, temporary restraining orders, subpoenas, the thin beginning of legal consequences, it felt anticlimactic and enormous at once. The law moved slow as molasses but precise. I had given it the nudge it needed, the rest would be its work. That night I sat on the porch with a cigarette I didn't need but wanted, the town's lights a soft coral. I'd achieved what I set out to. The syringe never left the floor of the clinic in the hands of someone who could do harm. The deposits were public record, and a web of witnesses existed who could not be bought easily. Revenge had been revealed not in violence but in exposure. It had been surgical, painful, and I'd admit, satisfying. Not like a feast, more like a stitch that tightens a wound closed. But satisfaction wasn't what I wanted most. What I wanted was the tidy, clean return of dignity, the sense that a man could say no to being erased. Tonight I had that. Weeks diluted the intensity into a steady hum. Trent's name made rounds at the feed store and the diner. The reporter ran a small piece about potential improprieties that made the county clerk frown and the clinic tighten protocols. Rourke faced an inquiry and, after a period of professional shame, agreed to restitution and community service. He'd been greedy, or scared, or both. The bank froze a suspicious account. The sheriff filed reports. The machinery of consequence clicked into place. Emily sorted through boxes in the attic like someone packing the remnants of a storm. Old pictures, letters, the small carved wooden horse I'd given her when she was 5. When she found the wedding album, she sat on the floor and ran a thumb across a photograph of our family on a summer day, smiling, imperfect. Tears came and went. I didn't see it, she said. I didn't want to. You saw it now, I said. That's the hard part. But seeing is better than pretending. We talked more honestly in the following weeks than we had in years. She apologized for not recognizing the manipulation sooner. I apologized for letting her be caught in the crossfire of my own hesitance to act earlier. We made no promises of perfectness, we promised clarity. Trent left town within a month, sold his truck, packed what he thought useful, and went. People whisper about where men like him end up: gambling dens, corporate cubicles, places that take but never give. The house stayed ours. The bills got paid. Repairs happened on my schedule. At night I still woke sometimes to the echo of syringes and neon clinic lights. Old things leave their shadows. But each morning I found the coffee waiting, the cat asleep in a sunbeam, and the calendar with small notes: Emily's yoga class, Mason's birthday, the feed store sale. Life returned like a careful tide. One afternoon, months later, a boy from the neighborhood asked me to look at his busted motorcycle. I crouched, fingers greasy, eyes squinting into the carburetor, and taught him how to tighten a bolt. He listened. There's a pleasure in passing on skill that's quieter than revenge, useful, generative. When the legal paperwork settled into files, I shredded a copy of Trent's power of attorney form and fed it into the shredder like a man disposing of a rusted nail. I never celebrated. There was no party, no triumphant speech. Revenge, in its most honest form, isn't a roar. It's a quiet settling. It's sitting at the kitchen table with someone you love and knowing the shape of their face again. That winter, Emily took me to the clinic to see Rourke, not as a patient, but as a man who'd come to apologize in person. He was pale, thinner, and full of regret. He spoke haltingly about mistakes, about the seduction of easy money, about how he'd been wrong. I listened, because sometimes forgiveness is a little like engineering: you replace a failing part with a better one. On the drive home, Emily reached across and took my hand. "We're okay," she said. It wasn't a promise of a perfect future. It was simply a truth. The thing I lost and the thing I gained were both small and enormous. I lost the illusion that family is unbreakable without work. I gained a new measure of peace that comes from standing for yourself. If you asked me now whether revenge was worth it, I'll tell you that it wasn't about the feelings it gave me. It was about reclaiming authorship over the last chapters of my life. They tried to write the ending for me. I wrote it myself. And when the nights come long and cold, I'd brew better coffee and listen to the radio. The bridge I once built still hums under the trucks crossing it. The world is loud and messy, but it's mine to watch, and that, at the end of a long life, is enough. If this story moved you, please support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, and leaving a comment with your thoughts. To continue the journey, click the box on the left for the next story. Thank you for being here.